My first time using cocaine, my first experience with cocaine, it wasn't something that I had planned on. It was a drug that I never necessarily wanted to do. I didn't plan on it going the way that it did. It changed my life forever.
If you're new to the channel, hit the like and subscribe button.
Using cocaine for the first time wasn't something I had planned for. I was out with friends. It all goes back to I was an alcoholic. I was drinking a ton. My first ex-wife, and I were in the midst of a divorce, and it was really painful for me. She ended up leaving me. I had all the rights to leave me. I was really struggling with it, and her big thing was, you drink too much, you're an alcoholic. And I didn't think I was an alcoholic. I didn't think I was an addict. I drank, though, every single night. I had all the traits of an alcoholic. Later on, I'm able to admit that I am an alcoholic. I never really thought of doing cocaine. I never thought of doing any drugs, but I was trying to numb the pain. I'm drinking, and one night I go out with my friend, and we go to the bar, and we're drinking. And I started getting just wasted. He was like, "Hey, dude, I want to do some coke." And I'm thinking to myself, like, I never really wanted to do coke. Like, it wasn't really something like I had to do. At that time, I was vulnerable. I just kind of wanted to numb everything. He's like, "Dude, have you ever done it before?" I'm like, "No, I've never done coke before." He's like, "You never done coke before?" He's like, "Dude, I'm getting some." So he ended up getting an 8 ball. He's like, "Here, hit me up with $100. We're gonna split this." So we ended up getting an 8 ball. And I remember it came in this little bag. It was white, tied in a knot on the top, and we went down to the car, broke out one of the CD cases, fucking chopping it up, split it out. And he's like, "Dude, you got to do a line of this." And he rolls up this bill and he snorts a line. These rails weren't very big rails. I'd never done it before. I remember just kind of like salivating. I was really nervous, but I was drunk. I remember in the car just leaning down and doing my first line of cocaine. And when I did my first line of cocaine, the first thing that I instantly noticed is how it made the back of my throat feel, and how this taste that came into my mouth. To me, it always kind of tasted kind of like chlorine-ish. It always had this really unique taste to it. I could feel it just traveling up my nose and kind of like tickling and going down my throat. I remember instantly kind of sobering up. And we were in the middle of playing pool and shooting pool at this bar. And we were in El Cajon, California. And he's like, "Dude, let's go back in." And he's like, "You want to do one more line? Let's do another line." And this is before I was an addict. I mean, this is the first time I ever done coke. And I'm like, "Another line? Are you sure?" He's like, "Oh yeah, dude, let's do another line." So we do another line. We get out of the car, and I remember being really paranoid that it's on my nose. And all I can remember is feeling just like this happiness feeling over me. I started sobering up, and I had a lot of shots already. I had a lot of beer. I was pretty drunk. And I remember feeling like, "Oh my goodness, I'm kind of sobered up a little bit. I feel good." And man, I started feeling that jaw lock up. And I always got into this whole thing of touching my face and just, and I remember just being really paranoid and wiping my nose a lot and just constant breathing it in. And just didn't want anyone to know that I'd done cocaine. And remember my head feeling just open and just happy. And it was like I could feel myself breathing, and I could feel myself starting to slow down. And we started shooting pool, and I realized all of a sudden I'm kind of focused in. I mean, this is before I realized that since cocaine's a stimulant and Adderall and all the ADHD meds are stimulants, that it's going to kind of affect me like a ADHD med did. And it did. It affected me kind of like an ADHD med. It got very hyper-focused. We were shooting pool. I got super hyper-focused into this game of pool. And it was the only time I ever used coke that I didn't have to go back and didn't want to go back for more and more lines. I ended up that night doing maybe 5 lines of coke, and that was it. I actually saved a majority of the cocaine, kept it in a bag, and didn't touch it again for almost a month. It didn't become addictive right away to me, but that feeling it gave me that night of just instantly sobering up, feeling kind of like Billy Badass, just feeling empowered, feeling my body tingle, feeling focused in. And I ended up having a lot of fun the rest of the night, and no matter how much I drank, I wasn't getting drunk. So I just kept drinking more and more, even though it was masking a lot of what you feel when you're drunk. It had just this feeling of to it. It's hard to explain. And I mean, even talking now, like I'm salivating, and I can feel my nose even start to water up a little bit because I became so addicted to cocaine. It was a drug, though, that I never thought was addicting. I never saw any kind of stigma around it where, like heroin, you're going to use heroin for the first time, you're going to be a junkie, or snorting, you smoke meth and you're going to be a junkie living under the bridge. Rich people did cocaine. It had this weird stigma to me around it. And I had fun that night. I'm like, man, this is a fun drug. Like, if I don't abuse this, I can have fun with this every now and then. That was my whole idea with it. I remember so proud, like I'm saving this bag and tying it back up, and I'm like, yeah, I got Coke now for the next couple days. If I could go back in time to that, man, I would beat my own, I would beat myself, because that was the beginning of the end, and that was the beginning of my cocaine addiction, because it didn't spawn off into this amazing, just hardcore addiction. It spawned off as this phenomenal, wonderful experience. My body feeling amazing, my brain feeling amazing, my nose, I loved the drip, I loved how it smelled, I loved how it made my teeth feel like they were growing, I loved how my face tingled, I loved feeling my face and just how it felt, the texture of my face. I loved that I could focus in and shooting pool. I loved that I felt like I was really interesting to talk to, and I would just keep talking and talking and talking. And it made me super sociable, and all my anxiety went away. My depression went away. I wasn't thinking about my divorce anymore. I wasn't thinking about anything but having fun. And that was the beginning of my cocaine addiction, of this love for this drug that never loved me back. In fact, it ended up ruining my life and took me down a lot of dark paths that I never wanted to go down. But it was an experience of just, I felt unstoppable. I felt amazing. I felt good. I felt good. I really felt good. And man, I can tell you, if you ever had that feeling with a drug, dude, you're an addict to that drug, that's going to turn out to be a drug of choice. Run away. If I could share anything from that first experience, like run away, because that's going to turn into a drug of choice, and it's going to go bad, and it's going to go bad fast. I didn't really become addicted to Coke for actually a couple years later, until I really started doing it more and more and more and more. And I went through a couple different phases with cocaine. The last phase was probably the worst phase. I got to the point that I was doing 1 to 2 8 balls of Coke a day, all off of having one night that was just an amazing night, always liking every single feeling it gave me, from how it felt in my nose to the burn, to I would get toilet paper and roll it up and snort wet toilet paper to like clear out my sinuses. Even when I became addicted to it, I thought I'm the only one now, because how could anyone get addicted to this drug? I never hear of anyone addicted to it. And I'm glad that I got help for it. I'm glad that I ended up reaching out and asking for help, and knowing that I needed help, because it put me in so many bad situations. But the first night that I used it, I'll never forget that night. I'll never forget the first time that I used Coke. It's one of those memories. Even though I was drunk that night, it's like burned into my brain. I mean, I remember the bar, I remember the pool table, I remember the people I was with, I remember the CD case, I remember the car, I remember everything about that night. And that's the scariest thing about it. I mean, if you're out there struggling, reach out for help. Don't take it on alone. Addiction is no joke. It ruined my life. It took me to places I never wanted to go and never want to go to again. And ask and tell everybody. I mean, the first step of getting sober, tell everybody you're an addict and just ask for help. And you'll be surprised at the help that you get. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a counselor. My name is Eric. I'm diagnosed with ADHD, PTSD, GAD, MDD, level 1 autism. I lost a wife and a father to suicide. I almost committed suicide. I attempted. I'm on medication for my ADHD. I've self-harmed before. I'm a recovering cocaine and alcoholic addict. And that battle is a battle like no other. Just know that you're not alone. That first experience was wonderful, but it led to the biggest nightmare of my life. If you're out there struggling, man, reach out for help, because it's not worth it.